Asia Post with me, Radi Francis, our weekly show where we bring you stories from the world's most volatile region. 10 years ago, West Asia witnessed a wildfire of revolts. It all started with a spark in Tunisia. Collective rage gave way to revolutions. West Asian regimes collapsed one after the other. But 10 years on, the explosive rage gave way to agony and dashed dreams in the region.
December 17, 2010. It all started with a young street vendor in Tunisia. Worn down by years of police harassment, Mohammed Bouazizi set himself on fire. While his self-immolation wasn't the first in the region, it sparked a fire like no other. Rage spilled out on the streets of West Asia. Pro-democracy protests broke out in Tunisia, Saudi Arabia, Yemen, Libya, Egypt, Syria and several other countries. Dictatorships toppled one after the other. Tunisia's Zine El Abidine Ben Ali, Egypt's Hosni Mubarak, Libya's Muammar Gaddafi, Yemen's Ali Abdullah Saleh. As their regimes crumbled, others in the region feared the power of the people. The Arab world was consumed by a revolutionary wildfire, one that changed the region forever. For a while, the collapse of autocracies looked unstoppable, but the fire slowly burnt out. The vacuum created by the downfall of regimes was not filled by the democratic reforms, but replaced by turmoil and taken up by non-state actors. Protest movements were brutally repressed, and jihadists found fertile ground. Islamic terrorism took over the space, and the focus of the world shifted to tackling it.
No, nothing has changed, but I hope so. It might take more 10 years, but young people must carry on protesting, speaking out to get their rights.
10 years on, explosive rage has given way to a bitter backlash among people. And spring has turned into what many call an Arab winter. West Asia Bureau, WION, World is One.
The Arab Spring was often dubbed as the first smartphone revolution. Social media gave protesters a technological edge. Smartphones with cameras became their weapons.
Twitter, YouTube and Facebook. These were the weapons used by the Arab Spring protesters. Social media and smartphones gave them a technological edge. Hyper-network and largely leaderless, protests flared up like flash mobs, making it harder for authorities to suppress them. While the first spark was the suicide of 26-year-old Tunisian vendor Mohammed Bouazizi, it was online campaigns that spread the message of anger and the hope for change. Bouazizi's self-immolation was not caught on video, but the protests it led to were. Smartphones had their cameras turned into weapons. Clips were shared especially on social media, a medium largely out of control of the regimes. Online platforms formed a bridge with traditional media, accelerating revolutions throughout the region. Powerful online images circulated on social media. Volunteers translated Arabic tweets for the international media. And anonymous hackers showed solidarity by mirroring websites. This watershed moment caught regimes by surprise, with popular uprisings spreading at the speed of the internet. There was nothing they could do to stop this mass mobilization. The Egyptian government even ordered an internet blackout, but it was too little and too late. Youngsters left their screens to join the offline action on the streets. The Arab Spring showed the promise of social media and its use to unleash social change. But 10 years on, that promise has faded. States have quickly caught up with their own cyber tools, weaponizing social media for their own agenda. and cracking down hard on online activists. Dissent was crushed. Hundreds of websites were blocked and social media users were jailed. Non-state actors like the ISIS also jumped into the virtual space, using the internet for propaganda and recruitment. While social media was the biggest weapon protesters had, a decade later, it has turned out to be a double-edged sword. West Asia Bureau, WION, World is One.
Saudi Arabia kicks off three-phase COVID-19 vaccination, with the country's health minister among those inoculated after the first shipment of the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine arrived in the kingdom. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu picks the next director of the Mossad spy agency. Identified only as D, the new chief is set to replace Yossi Cohen. Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei makes the first public appearance in weeks since health rumors. Khamenei says that Washington could not be trusted, adding that US hostilities will continue after Biden takes office. This system can hit targets flying at different altitudes, such as cruise missiles or ballistic missiles. Israel successfully tests multi-tier missile defense system.
40 years ago, a major war between Iraq and Iran set the stage for regional dynamics in West Asia. But today, the relationship between the two countries is rapidly changing. In our next report, we will show you how Iran is shaping its relation with Iraq by developing Shia shrines across the country.
Iraq holds an important place in Iran's revolutionary religious narrative and strategy. It is home to the second largest Shiite population in the world after Iran. The third Imam or leader of Shiite Muslims, Imam Hussein, is buried in Karbala. His shrine is visited by Shiites from across the globe. Today, Iran continues to foster ties with the religious community in Iraq. Recent reports confirm that a senior Iranian commander made an unannounced visit to one of Shiite Islam's holiest sites in the southern Iraqi city of Karbala. Hassan Pelarak, a top officer in the Revolutionary Guard's elite force, was checking in on a construction project led by a firm he owns. And this was not the first time. In October 2019, Pelarak was seen in Iraq with the Iranian Major General, late Qasem Soleimani, of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. Pelarak has numerous private companies and is very active in plundering the people of Iran. And Qasem Soleimani personally made the last appointments in the Holy Shrine's reconstruction headquarters in July 2019. Soleimani institutionalized Iranian presence in Iraq through the Holy Shrine's reconstruction headquarters. Day and night, Iranian laborers are filling in a 40-meter deep, 50,000 square meter crater, just next to the shrine with steel girders and cement brought from Iran. The multi-story buildings that they are erecting will contain ablution stations, a museum, and a library. Millions of predominantly Shia pilgrims from across the Islamic world will be able to access the Hussein Shrine via a large road tunnel. The investigation reports suggest that the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, which is a branch of the Iranian armed forces, is working to reconstruct the shrines of historical Shiite leaders in Iraq. The construction site, half empty about a year ago, has quickly been filled with the skeletons of buildings. Pelarak signed a nearly $650 million contract in 2015 with the Hussein Shrine for Kothar to build the extension. The headquarters lists at least 17 projects it is overseeing at important shrines in Najaf, Karbala, Baghdad, and the northern city of Samarra. These contracts are often years long and worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Though Iranian influence is resented by large sections of Iraq's Shiite population, the religious ties run deep. Iraq has historically been a significant regional actor for Iran. At various points over the past few centuries, it has been a foe, a rival, and often a strategic partner. Now Tehran's strategy is to keep boots on the ground to a minimum and its participation as nearly invisible as possible. Iran is using its presence also to project regional strength to Sunni Muslim rival Saudi Arabia and bolster its legitimacy at home as a defender of Shiite holy places. West Asia Bureau, WION, World is One.
A group of Iraqi women in Basra have found a new sport, wrestling. But it's not only each other that they are wrestling. They are actually fighting stereotypes in a conservative society.
These 16 Iraqi women have a lot at stake. Not only are they battling each other during the practice, they're also fighting stereotypes in a conservative Iraqi society.
We live in a conservative society. Very few women can play sports. Only if their family is open-minded and accepts the idea that a woman might be out from the afternoon until evening for training. Our society is pretty conservative in this matter.
Iraqi coach Abdul Karim Gadban founded the wrestling team in 2018 after moving back to his country from Denmark. According to him, the biggest obstacle was convincing families to allow their daughters to join the team.
Despite things, we sat with families and talked to them and explained that it is a female team and we do not have a female team in Basra. Most of the wrestlers' families are athletes and they understood the situation.
In order to ease their concerns, Gadban ensured that the women's transportation was accounted for. All his coaching also happens verbally, with Gadban demonstrating any moves with a male player.
Some movements are difficult to apply to women, so we had to bring a man from our men's team so I can demonstrate the moves with them. Then I explain the move in detail and then we start applying it as they follow my verbal instructions.
More than a dozen women between the ages of 8 and 25 have joined the team since 2018. The team has participated in 2 local championships, also winning a gold medal in the Arab Championship in 2019. However, some of the wrestlers continue to receive backlash.
I'm criticized by everyone who knows I'm a wrestler. They say it makes me masculine and that I will lose my femininity. But I'm convinced that there is no difference between men and women. We are all one and we women represent half of the society.
West Asia Bureau, WION, World is One.
Year 2020 has been marked by protests. One that took the world by storm is the Black Lives Matter movement. But as the BLM movement helps shape societies around the globe, Black Yemenis have scant hope to end centuries of discrimination, one that is only worsened by the country's civil war.
Hassan gives no flicker of recognition when asked about Black Lives Matter. But he can recount how he faces racism on a daily basis. He often has to tolerate slurs that mean slave or servant.
When we come across people for the first time, most of them try to get away from us and avoid dealing with us. They describe us as servants. Also, our children in schools are treated differently than other children.
Members of his minority group in Yemen are known as Muhammashin, which literally means the marginalized. They count among the poorest of the poor. In the Arab world's most impoverished country. Most of them live in dismal conditions in densely populated slums. Some of these families even reside in caves.
In this area, we can't find shelter. No blankets, no clothes, no food. We can't find clean water to drink, only dirty water from the valley.
While they hold Yemeni identification papers, most of them are treated differently. There have been debates over the ethnic origins of the community in Yemen. Most black Yemenis live in the Red Sea coastal plain of Tihama. Others live in Sana'a in the north and Aden in southern Yemen. Some believe they descended from African slaves or Ethiopian soldiers. Others believe they are of Yemeni origin. Black Yemenis make up between 2 and 10% of the population, but they have long struggled to survive, confined to low-paying jobs like street sweeping or collecting garbage. They exist outside the country's tribal social structure.
We suffer from racial discrimination. We do not know if this is because of our black skin. They've given us no rights, but it is time that we are granted those rights.
Yemen's spiraling civil war and mass displacement of its population has been described as the worst humanitarian crisis in the world. Mired in conflict since 2014. It all started when the Houthi rebels removed the internationally recognized government in power. Earlier this year, rebel chief Abdul Malik al-Houthi called for the integration of black Yemenis into society, a move that sparked both hope and skepticism. According to many, the rebels' call was merely a ploy to draw them into their ranks. But even before the conflict, Yemen's social system put al-Muhammashin at the very bottom of the social hierarchy. Their suffering has only worsened since then. West Asia Bureau, we own. World is one.
It all started with thousands of people on the streets of Syria, but it ended up with millions on the move. I'm talking about the Syrian refugee crisis, the world's largest humanitarian crisis since World War II. So let's go back to where it all began. Year 2011, Syria plunged into a civil war.
Allahu Akbar.
Fighting reached key Syrian cities. The death toll was on the rise. As the violence escalated, families began to flee. Within 2 months, the first refugee camps opened in Turkey. Lebanon, Jordan, Turkey, and Iraq, Syria's neighboring nations, felt the brunt of the mass exodus. By March 2013, more than 1 million people had fled Syria. Many even took the long, dangerous road to Europe by sea. Remember this viral image? In 2015, the body of the Syrian toddler Alan Kurdi washed ashore in Turkey. The family had drowned after their inflatable boat sank in the Aegean Sea. This picture has since become a symbol of the refugee crisis and the hardships that Syrians endure to reach Europe. Here are some numbers that highlight only a part of the crisis. Over 12 million Syrians are displaced from their homes. More than 6.6 million have been forced to flee the country. Over 1 million Syrian children were born in exile. Another 6.7 million Syrians remain internally displaced, with many living in refugee camps across Syria. their existence even more precarious.
رمضان سيء علينا بالمخيمات. نطلب من مجتمع الدولي انه نرجع على بيوتنا من امراض الكورونا. يعني كل شيء سيء علينا، نتمنى انه نرجع على بيوتنا احسن من المخيمات.
For those who escape to neighboring countries, the situation isn't any better. Resources are scarce. Camps and settlements are becoming overcrowded. Many are being forced to sleep outside in freezing temperatures. I traveled to some of these camps before the coronavirus pandemic hit the world to take a glimpse into the lives of those living in the camps. Our journey took us to several refugee camps across Syria's borders, mainly the ones located along the Lebanon, Jordan, and Turkish borders. Some of them are not allowed to go outside the camps. The refugees are stranded, waiting for aid from outside. Many in Jordan prefer to escape the camps. Some even pay to be smuggled out of the camps. Many of them are being used as political puppets. Trafficking is a rampant phenomenon in most of the camps. As we walk through the refugee camps, this is the world's worst humanitarian crisis unfolding right in front of my eyes. Over 60% of Syrian refugees live in poverty, but some of them do not want to return to Syria. If violence wasn't enough, the coronavirus pandemic has further escalated the crisis. People continue to live in overcrowded refugee camps where social distancing is not an option. There's limited access to food and medicine, and the situation continues to worsen every day.
هلق احنا ما عندنا شيء، تركنا بيوتنا وارضنا ورزقنا، ما ضل عندنا شيء غير السله، هالسله اللي عم يعطونا اياها تنقطع، اولادنا بصير عندنا مجاعه، وضعنا صفر وإسا بده يصير اسوء. وموضوع المرض الكورونا هذا.
In a video call with the Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, Russian President Vladimir Putin said that the refugees should return to their country and help rebuild Syria. But the growing economic and health crisis in the country suggests otherwise. The question remains, will Syrians ever return home? That's all we have for you on this episode of the West Asia Post. I will see you next week with a brand new lineup, bringing you more stories from the world's most volatile region. Until then, as we grapple with the pandemic, stay home and stay safe in the festive season. I am Ghadi Francis, and you are watching WION. World is One.
WION now available in the United States. Download the app now. Stay connected with the world.